And I'll pull up the agenda. Okay, folks, so the first couple items involve city and council update. The first couple items involve the city council update with Mark Fagin, and he is going to be joining us closer to 7:15, so we're just going to push that to the end. But before, Shannon, do you have any updates from the city we should talk about before we get going?
I do. I can do that part right now.
Great.
All right. So I will share with you some highlights from the city update, and then I will email the city update to you after the meeting is over, and there will be links and things within that so that you can get more information, and it also goes into more detail in the actual document. So the search process for the long-term city manager has started, and a decision is expected in early summer. So there'll be more information about that in the document if you want to know how you can get involved. The Human Rights Advisory Commission wrapped up the final session of the BPD HRAC inquiry session in January, and the final recommendations were presented to City Council on January 26th. So you can watch that recording, and then in the document I send, there will also be a link to give you more information about that. The topics that were included were police funding, transparency, police changes, community connection, school resource officer program. The Beaverton received a WIFIA loan to help finance a series of projects that will enhance the reliability and resiliency of our water system and meet the needs of the growing area. The project is expected to create 500 new jobs. Washington County Cooperative Library Services has eliminated overdue fines and will no longer charge for overdue materials. This is because studies showed that overdue fines most severely impacted lower income communities and communities of color, and it didn't significantly promote people returning things on time, so they're just getting rid of it altogether. That is it for the city update in a nutshell. I will share that due to the conversation in the December VAC meeting and then our conversation in the January VAC meeting, I went ahead and created a survey for our city staff and sent it to the entire staff to find out how they use the vision. And so the questions in that survey are, has the community vision been a beneficial resource to you? How have you used the community vision? And then they have a series of options, and these options were generated from my colleagues who had told me prior that they use it in this way. So just a brief overview. They don't use the community vision to inform decisions about where to allocate time and effort when creating work plans, to identify success indicators, when creating budget documents or allocating funds, to establish internal goals that align with community priorities, to inform decisions about future programs, events, or projects, to identify potential areas for growth and development, when talking to groups or organizations about what the city is working toward, to build relationships with community partners through city projects, and their program was created in response to the community vision. And then we also have an option for other where they can write in something else. And then we have another question, has the community vision impacted you or your team in any other notable ways? I did get some feedback already that the initial community vision did have a negative impact on one team. So I'll share that next in March when I have all of the results. But overall, I think we'll get a pretty positive response on that one. But the final question is, please provide any feedback on how the vision could be more useful to you. So I will have those responses for you in March, and hopefully that will help to guide us as well as to how we want to form the vision and how it's used by our city staff. Let's see. I've updated the VAC page on the website, and all of your names are on there now. And I will update the vision page. I just have to rewrite it and upload some different documents to it as well.
Shannon, it looks like there's a question in the chat for you. It says, was the first question a yes or a no?
Yeah, the first, sorry, I realized that when I was saying it. The first question is a yes or no. And so it's a list of things and they can tick off which like applies to them. Yeah. You're welcome. Brian, do you want to talk now about what I talked about with Village Baptist, or do you want to wait and do that later?
Yeah, but why don't you give us the introduction to that, because I don't know a whole lot about it.
Okay.
Thanks.
So sure. We received an email from a community partner, the Village Baptist, who is offering to include printed materials in boxes that they'll be handing out in an outreach event. And their outreach event reaches about 275 people from a wide ethnic and socioeconomic demographic. And they need the materials by the 12th of February. But if we want to put in something about the community vision, we can certainly print things off and have those added. If you want to do a short survey or something and throw that in there too, just to get some preliminary information from that group of people, we could do that as well. So it's just something to consider. It's, you know, coming up really quickly, but it is an outreach opportunity. And I think those are going to be kind of few and far between unless we create them in the near future. So thought I'd let you know about it. That's all from me.
So I have a few thoughts about the Village Baptist opportunity, but I'd like to hear what other people think first, if anyone else has thoughts. Okay, well, I'll start with mine and then we'll see what you all think after you have some time to digest it then. And I don't think we have enough time to come up with a really comprehensive survey, but what I do think we have time to do is to ask maybe a handful of questions, or even just one or two, saying, with an intro saying, we're going to be redoing the community vision. Here's a sentence or two about what the community vision is. Before we launch into this process, what do you think we should know about the city of Beaverton? What are the things you like the most? What are your biggest concerns or things you want to see change? Just a few quick things like that don't get into really a whole lot of detail, because I don't think we have time to figure out what details it is that we want to do. But I'd hate to pass up an opportunity where we have one. And so be curious to see what you all think about that.
What would be the mechanism for collecting the information? Would they answer questions on site, mail it in later? Is it a link? I'm just trying to picture how logistically it would work.
So logistically, you can make that decision. You can either include a flyer that would have a link that they could go to online and complete a survey. However, given who the group is, they may not all have access to that. And so we also have funds, and we could purchase stamps and send pre-stamped envelopes with the survey so that they can send them back to us when they've completed it.
Could you provide a little bit more information about the outreach event that they're doing? And is it a church? Because you said Baptist, but not church at the end of it. I'd just like to know a little bit more about it. Are they giving out food to people, or like what is the context of this event? Thank you.
Sure. I will read you how they have described it. As to whether or not it is a church, I don't actually know. I'm not familiar with Village Baptist, and this was forwarded on to me from a colleague, but I will find out and let you know. But they said, church. Oh, okay. Well, thanks. Super. So it says Village is holding a food distribution event in mid-February for 275 people from our immediate area across a wide ethnic and socioeconomic demographic. We're wondering if there are any materials regarding city services, etc., that we can share at that event. We have researched the group. We have researched that the group is in varying levels of employment due to COVID. Since we are inviting the entire neighborhood of households around our campus, which we found has income disparity from well below the poverty line to annual income of over 100,000, to this free food giveaway with the Oregon Food Bank, we wonder if there were any materials the city had on services for the community or opportunities to get involved or share their feelings. So there you have it.
I think if that's the case, maybe it could be more open-ended, because I definitely don't think we have time to put together survey questions. But maybe just doing a quick pulse check saying, I don't know what the one question would be, but just what is your vision for the future of Beaverton, or what is one thing that would make your life better about living in Beaverton, and just kind of see what comes back.
And I think this could be a good opportunity, you know, if we can ask them, like, can we contact you in the future how can we contact you? That might be a good way to get them back at some point when we do have things more fleshed out.
Yeah, I really like that idea of asking, are you willing to be involved? Can we follow up with you? What's the best way? Those type of questions too. And I think if I'm thinking of the right organization, Village Baptist does a lot of different types of outreaches. So it would be a good opportunity to start maybe partnering with them or see what other opportunities they have. And it is a very diverse population in every way.
And does Beaverton already have language services available so that we could print this to at least like go to a link where they could see it in another language if English wasn't their first language?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I'm wondering if we could, the flyer that we make, I wonder if it can be just a QR code, and then the QR code leads to like now pick the language, and then it would, like, one QR code would lead us to the top 8 or 10 languages in the city, and then we don't have to do a bunch of different things. It's just one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because typing it in, people can have like typos and stuff, and it's a lot harder. So this makes it more easy.
And QR codes are super accessible. Everybody has a cell phone.
We might want to have a link to, not everybody might have a smartphone though. They might have still like a flip phone or a pay-as-you-go kind of phone. So they wouldn't necessarily be able to take a picture of the QR code, but I like the idea of having the link. And Sarah, you suggested like, what's the best thing about living in Beaverton? And I think alternatively, maybe there's that second question about what's something that could be improved or what's something we could be doing better, so that we can have people that'll give feedback on both ends of the spectrum, hopefully. And that can give us a good kind of pulse check to see where people are feeling both on both sides.
Can some of the questions, Shannon, you asked the staff, can those be repurposed in any way? I know we don't have that much time.
The ones that I asked the staff, you mean? I don't think that those would be pertinent. We do have some open-ended questions, like stock questions that we ask. So let's see which ones here would be. We could ask, why do you feel Beaverton is a special place to be? And what are your hopes and plans for our community? Those are just a couple that we actually have written for the city to ask people when we interact with them. So, but yeah, my survey questions are not applicable. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm not sure that I like that's kind of a too rosy of a question. Like it only leads into like, you can only give us good answers, please, thank you. Like, I don't know, I'd like it to be worded a little bit differently if others agree with that. And then also I'm wondering about some sort of thing that people could mail into, like in addition to online, because not everybody like can easily go online. There's like the flip phones, and then there's also like people just don't have access sometimes. So
What about a postcard that's easy? It would be one page that people could just check off and then put in the mail as an option.
yeah, and the QR code could be on the other side, so they could like, you know, go to it.
When is the actual distribution event that they are holding?
We need the material by the 12th. I do not know when the actual date of the event is, but I can see if I can find it here.
And is it something that we could actually put up a table at?
No. Nope. Sorry. Because they're limited in having 50 people on site at a time and all that sort of thing too, and all of the COVID rules. It's just not something we'd be able to do.
So I think, just to make sure I'm getting temperature, everyone thinks this is a good idea to do something, right? Is anyone disagreeing with that? Okay, good. I'm glad we're all on that same page. So then the next step obviously is figuring out what we're going to ask, and then I think whether there's a means to do it, whether it's postcards or whatever. But we should decide on the question or questions now, because we can't actually do that over a chain email with like public meetings law and things like that. Or the alternative would be that we say, this is the general direction we want. Like we want to do 3 questions, one about what you like, one about what you don't like, another one that's super open-ended, like what's Beaverton look like 20 years from now to you, or something like that. And then we can give that to Shannon. And then since the board has set its direction, then like Shannon and I or a few other people can be on an email. Because I think we can have like 2 or 3 on an email, but not more than that. Or Shannon and city staff can put together what those things are, but I want to make sure we have a product to give to her before we move on. Does anyone have an idea of a specific question that they think would be really important to ask?
Sarah, what was your first idea for a question? I really liked it because it really kind of, it was open-ended enough that it didn't have a slant, but I really liked it.
I think it was, what is one thing that would make your life better in Beaverton?
And we have you recorded so we can check it later.
As we come up with the questions, I'm going to write them down in the chat window. That way we don't lose them. And I see there are already some other suggestions there too, which is awesome. And then let's try to, by sometime between 6:55 and 7 at the latest, decide on whether there's just direction we want to give to Shannon and staff, or if we want to pick a specific question, because we have a lot of things we want to cover tonight, but I do think we need to work this out if we can.
If there's one question to ask, I think Sarah's is the, I mean, that's a great question. How can Beaverton better serve you?
Yeah, I really like Sarah's how can Beaverton better serve you? And I also really like Amy's what's your vision for Beaverton is sort of like a forward-looking question. People can sort of decide what that means for them.
I like both those questions too. Do other people like those questions? Does anyone have another question or a potential change to one of those questions they want to discuss?
I like the idea of asking questions that are future thinking and that are positive. And to Amy's point, I mean, of course, we don't want to ask anything that's super rose colored, but also I just want to be mindful about the way that we frame the questions, and that the very act of asking questions is itself going to affect change in our city. So we don't want to ask questions that are inviting lots of complaining or lots of dwelling on negative things, but if we can ask things that will help people bring up like creative things that could really make our city awesome, more awesome, that's what I think we should focus on. So I think that's, when we ask what people love about living here, I think that's naturally going to elicit like, here's some of the great things. And some people will feel inclined to then go on and say, but here's this other thing. But even if all we hear are the positive things, we'll know where to focus more energy naturally, I think, if that makes sense.
I agree in some ways, and I just wonder also if we're trying to figure out how we're not serving people right now, if that is one of our objectives.
I think that when it comes to how we serve folks, that's an important thing for us to consider with the vision, because part of the vision is saying, how do we want the government to operate and relate to people over the next 20 years? And so if people have ideas, either concrete things or more things that still need to be formed out about what the city can do better for them, that having that information now might help us develop questions later to see if those are sentiments shared by other people that then can be turned into whatever end product to give to the city to change the course of what's happening. So I think it could be helpful.
We could also just have a very open thing like, please share any ideas that would help us plan Beaverton's future. So not as a question, but just as a third piece, a third element without a direction.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Wade, keep going.
No,
so is the purpose of the postcard to just give us an idea of what direction we want to head into?
I think there are a number of potential purposes, but what I'm seeing as the purpose now is one, that to give us an idea of some responses we might get from these communities at this early planning stage that might give us an idea of how to better formulate what we're going to do in the future. But then also I see it as an opportunity to contact this community and let them know that we're going to be starting this process and beginning that relationship building with them and with this church who does a lot of outreach work from what I'm aware, just through some Google searches about them. And so I think that's a valuable opportunity too, rather than just turning it down and saying, nah, we'll see you later.
I still go back to Sarah's question of how can Beaverton better serve you? Because it can lead to, no, they're doing everything great, no problem. Or, by the way, I just got evicted and blah, blah, blah. And on a postcard, like how much transcribing do we want to do? How much human power do we have if people are going to email or handwrite something? Like how many hours are we going to spend compiling? So that it sounds like this needs to be like fairly short, with a space for, would you like us to contact you for further discussion? So it could be like one question and then contact information.
Yeah, okay, so I think a lot of people are suggesting that they like Sarah's question about how Beaverton can better serve you. Let's take a quick vote, because I think we actually have to vote when we make decisions on this sort of stuff, right, Shannon? Or am I off? Can we just be casual about it?
Brian, can I make one more comment before we vote?
Absolutely.
Because I also just want to think about our audience, and that's why I suggested that specific question, because it's people who are seeking a service. They're seeking food or some warm clothing. They're seeking something. So something is not serving them. So that was specifically why I chose that as well, as opposed to the broader, if you were at the farmer's market and just interacting with anyone and wanting to get more ideas too. So it was a little more targeted for the audience.
It sounds like to me, everyone's reasonably in agreement that that's a question that we want to ask. Some people might want to ask more. Some people might want that to be the only one, but I feel like we're all on the same page about that. Is there anyone who doesn't want that question on there for some reason or another? Okay, awesome. So I think that's definitely a question that we want on there. So Shannon, if you don't mind taking note of that. And then I would suggest that we also have an open-ended question to have them, like in the realm of what Wade was suggesting, something giving them space to give us open feedback about how we should reach out to folks. Because especially with these communities that are coming for a service, they're the people I think are the hardest to reach. And so if they have ideas, I want to hear them sooner rather than later. That's my thought on that, but I'd like to hear what you all think too.
But our charter is for like years down the road, right? We're not planning on fixing any of the immediate problems. I know you said that we'll probably base our questions on some of the things we hear now to, kind of think about long-term solutions. But is there something we want to hear from them about like what I think somewhere, either Brian, you brought it up, or Wade or somebody, about where do you see Beaverton in like 5 years or 10 years or something? So do we need to have an element of that, because that really is our charter, not fixing like current problems?
I think we should be thinking about that with our future questions, but for this thing that we have to produce next week, I would just say let's throw out whatever we can as a practice run for ourselves.
There will be another opportunity for outreach too, hopefully. And on March 21st, the Kurdish community is hoping to do their in-person event that they were going to do during Welcoming Week that got pushed because of the COVID and then wildfires. And so if all goes well, that will happen. And in our March meeting, I'll give you more details about that and how we might be able to be there. We'll probably only be able to have 1 or 2 people there, but we can do something, hopefully.
That'd be excellent too. So does anyone think we should only have one question? Just a quick show of hands. And if you do, I think that's fine. But I just want to know if most people think that, then we can just move on with just that one question. But is anyone really set on only having one question?
I have a dissenting view. It doesn't have to go this way, but I wonder about the wisdom of us trying to come up with a survey and a piece to distribute next week when we're so early in the process. And I wonder if it might be better to just come up with some kind of a contact piece that we could put in those boxes, asking people if they would be willing to participate in this process, just inviting them to the process. I don't know. I know it's a good opportunity to get feedback, but I think there's also going to be lots of these. Like the school district gives out meals twice a week at locations all over the city. And then they also give out food boxes, like I think on Wednesdays or maybe once a month or something. So like there are other things too. And I wonder if it would be better for us to really focus, like do our retreat this weekend and figure out what we want to ask and how we want to do it and kind of come up with our strategy before we jump in and start collecting information without a plan. So that I just want to say it, and then we can move on. And if everybody else wants to go ahead and ask questions, I'm fine.
Jen, I thought about something similar. Like I agree that it does feel early. I think the nice thing about asking a question is that, like, if I imagine I was getting this, I probably might not just give my information to someone and make the effort to mail it in. But I feel like if I was like asked my opinion and I got to give input into something else and like feel like my voice is heard in some way, like it makes it maybe more likely. And that's the nice thing I think about asking a question.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think maybe it's also a getting our name out there. They might not the first time, but maybe the second or the third time. Then they will see and they'll know. That's my idea. And also really finding out if we can contact people or if they have any opinions about the best way to be contacted.
I also see this as a dry run for us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're practicing, the 12 of us are practicing how to talk to each other. How do we exchange these ideas in this awkward format? And I think it's worthwhile to put the effort towards it.
I think there might be families out there who maybe can't manage something that they need to think about 6 months down the line, but they can spend 5 minutes now giving some feedback. So we would at least grab some feedback. I agree with Jen that the best feedback will be later when we've had time to think about it and craft a better survey. But I also wonder if people are in crisis mode right now, that they're not going to keep the postcard to save for later. They just want to share their information now and then be done with it.
Yeah, and I was also wondering if we could use this again if we make it and we like it enough, and maybe it could be like, we are starting a visioning process, like, and just like outlay a little bit what that is on this postcard, so that people know and are aware, and we can give it out again. And then it has, the 1 or 2 questions, it seems like at least 2 questions that we want to ask. And yeah, I kind of like something open-ended about what's your vision for Beaverton, or Wade had said something as like a second question.
Yeah, I see there are 3 positive things for doing this now. One, of course, is yes, it's a dry run and it'll help us, work through any kinks. The second one is, raise awareness of the existence of Black Haven with some of these people. And the third one I see is we will eventually need input from a lot of different communities around the city. And so if we can get access to this community, anything we get back, that would be a pool of additional, or that adds to the pool of people that we can contact in the future for, just other surveys.
Okay, so it seems like the consensus is that we should go forward. And so I think that's what we should do at this point. But Jen, I really do appreciate you bringing that up. It's important to think about. And when Shannon first emailed me yesterday or the day before about this, my reaction was like, oh gosh, I don't know, how are we gonna do this in this amount of time? And so I feel you. But then as I thought about it more and more, I think the potential benefits outweigh the potential harms on this one. Okay, so we have the one question from Sarah, which I think is really great. And do folks generally agree that we should have one other question that's an open-ended question, asking them something to the effect of, what's your vision for the city, or how can we reach you, and what's a good way to reach you and the people who are in your community in the future, something to that effect. Do people agree that those should be the 2 questions? Does anyone think there's a third thing that we should ask? And I think we should probably limit it to 3 given what we're doing here.
I think you asked a second different question that is an important one. The one where you say, how can we contact your community and what's your vision? And then the third is, what can Beaverton do to serve you better? Or the other one that we'd already agreed upon. I like the one that you asked though about how can we reach your community, because that is one of the things we're grappling with.
Okay, so that would be 3, and we can always word it too. So one's like a second part of the other, and just to, like, in terms of space. But I like that. So we have 3 ideas. 1, the initial question about how can the city better service you? 2, an open-ended question about your vision for the future of Beaverton. And 3, how can we contact you and people in your more direct community? Do people agree those should be the 3 things that we ask, and then the city can sort of play with the final wording, but that's what we're all comfortable with? Is anyone uncomfortable with that?
I like Christina's use of the word connect with rather than contact, because it puts it's more of a mutual exchange rather than an obligation on our part to reach out.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable with asking how we can connect with people in your community. I don't know. It just feels like we're making some assumptions, or I mean, I think we should just be very direct and say, can we contact you again?
I was thinking the same thing. Like if I was asked, or if anybody in this group was asked, how can I connect with your community? Like, what do you mean? Like people I'm in school with, people I work with, people like, what community do you have in mind about me?
Like I'm open to whatever wording you want. My thought of it, and if I read a card to that, it'd be the people I associate with, is what I would think. Like if someone asked me that, that's what I would think. But I'm happy. I think however we want to word a question about how to get in touch with these folks in the future, what's a good way to reach out to them in the future, I think it's good to do.
Could we ask if there's any recommendations for groups that they're aware of that we may want to connect with in the future? Just have them list names of groups.
What if we wait for the follow-up on that part? So see if they're willing to connect with us again. And then that could be, we could talk to them, and that could be kind of your closer. Sometimes you don't want to put that all out there at the very beginning. And then once they're comfortable with you and they feel like they've been heard, then they may be more willing to say, you know who else would be really good for you to talk to? And then they would provide that. Just an idea.
That's a good point. Yeah. And I think especially like if you weren't giving the context of like, we're asking you this because we want you to be involved in the vision process, then I wouldn't be comfortable having that question on there at all. Like we'd need to situate it. But I like your idea of having it as the follow-up. I don't know what other people think.
On this postcard, are we also planning on like a short little blurb somewhere on like what the visioning, like what the VAC is all about? I think a well-crafted few sentences on that would definitely be important.
Agreed. Okay, so Shannon, do you have the information that you need from us to get this started? And then obviously, if we need something else, you know, you can email us, I think individually or groups of 2 or 3 to figure things out. But I just want to make sure we avoid the big chain emails with the public meeting stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm all set.
Awesome.
I do also just want to make you all aware that the chat now has to be included in the meeting minutes. It's so anything
in
you
its
put
entirety?
In its entirety. So
Wow.
anything you put in the chat is, who knows, but it's a thing. A lot of groups have actually shut down their chats and aren't doing them at all anymore. It's up to you whether or not you want to do that. I will save the chat at the end of the meeting and send it to you, Christina, to add to the minutes, but just so you're aware.
I've been taking pictures of it, but I would appreciate just the whole rundown.
Yeah.
I just want to say that if you're going to put something as an explanation of what VAC is about, That should be limited to about 2 sentences at most.
I think the mission statement on the website and on the community vision pamphlets is probably the way to go.
Are we doing a QR code to other languages? Okay.
If possible.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's something we can do with this turnaround, I think anything to enable folks who don't speak English would be really helpful.
Could one of the sentences about the Vision Action Committee be that this year we're doing the visioning process, or, I don't know exactly what the timeline is, but we need to tell them that we're creating a new vision action plan and we want them to be part of it, right?
I think that's right. I agree with that. Okay, so moving forward.
Well, look at this, Brian. You led us through our first action of 2021.
Oh, you led you. I didn't have to do any leading on this. So that was really, you guys are awesome.
Bravo, team.
Yeah, good job, team. So now we're at the point we're going to approve the December and January minutes. Did folks have a chance to look at those before this meeting? Okay. Does anyone have any changes that they would like to have made? So then with that, I entertain a motion to approve both the December and January minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second? Anybody?
I second.
Okay. So we'll just do a vote by acclamation. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay. Motion carries. Those are approved. Staff liaison update. Oh, I didn't see that on there. So we already did that. Excellent. We're moving along the agenda. Next is Zen City. And so I'll do a brief intro to this, but I think Shannon knows more about the details than I do, or maybe, or hopefully. And so we'll tag team on this one. But there's a meeting earlier this week, or no, maybe it was last week. I don't know. Time flies, COVID. But there's a company called Zen City that our city already works with. And what they do is they're able to aggregate online information, mostly from news media and social media. And they use that data to essentially allow us to test the waters as to people's awareness on certain topics, and also gather from the sources they're taking the information from, people's general opinions, and then how those shift over time. Now that data is very limited, right? Because it's limited by the data that goes into it. So if you're only surveying social media posts and news outlets, then you're only getting the comments on news outlets and information from people who comment on news posts and information from people who comment on the various social media posts, right? But their take on it, and by there I mean Zen City's take on it, is that it can be a good supplement to what we're doing here. Not that it would, I think the way I was interpreting what they had to say is that we would have our own visioning process with our surveys and meetings and all those sorts of things we're going to do that we'd get information from. But then that Zen City could serve as a heat check to that too, and could also be used in the earlier stages to help us form our questions and ask and figure out if there are things we should ask about that we otherwise wouldn't be thinking about. And the folks who had been working with it at the city, like I think Jemai has worked with it previously and some other people, they thought fairly highly of it, but I have no experience with it. So it's hard for me to say. And just by my nature, I'm always a little skeptical of people who want to draw conclusions based on social media posts, but that's just my bias in that regard. And there are other people who are more tech friendly than that. But that's the extent of really my takeaway from it. And I think Shannon may be able to offer more, but then I'd like to hear your thoughts about whether this service might be something valuable to us or not, or how so.
First of all, the city has already covered the cost of it, and so it's free for us. And I am familiar with it. Our marketing department uses it a lot, and they give us reports after any of our events that let us know how all of the online social media interactions went and what kind of, well, it's essentially a trend analysis to find out how the event did on social media. They also have their own survey service, so we would be able to use that too, and they could crunch the numbers for us rather than us doing like SurveyMonkey or something like that, where we then have to analyze the data ourselves. So we had that possibility too, which isn't to say that that's how we would want to collect data for the vision. But if you're looking for just some initial data or quick things like to give you like a temperature check or check on anything, we could do that for now until we get a consultant and build out our own survey to actually do that for the vision. So let's see, they have the ability to go back and look over what was trending in the past data, so they can go back for 2 years. So we'd be able to find out what's been trending in the city over the past 2 years and not necessarily be stuck getting information that is influenced by COVID. So we would at least have some pre-COVID information that we could potentially look at that might be useful to us. And
when you say trending in the city, this is a data on what is trending in social media about the city, correct?
Yes.
So there are things trending that are not hitting social media, such as maybe how houseless people are living their lives that aren't using social media, then that is not included.
Correct.
There could be articles about houselessness in Beaverton that could be trending.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, people can comment on that. And sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I was just looking at their website. I put it in. It seems really interesting, as like you were saying, to kind of give us some foundation of just what another pulse check that if I don't know how quick we can get information from them, but it might be something really interesting to dive into as one of the retreat topics.
We can get the information overnight, which is one of the great things. It's good turnaround. Like we can send them a question and they can run it through their system and see if they have any data that pertains to that question and then share that with us. Or they can just look for keywords and things like that that continue to be brought up.
And then Wade, to your point, which is an important one, and I asked some questions of them in that same vein, though not exactly that. The way that they do it isn't just pulling data from, say, posts coming from a particular set of zip codes, but they follow all the various community organizations who have social media pages. And so examples like Oregon Food Bank page, Home Plate Youth Services, groups like that. And then the city staffers like Jemai is one of the people who tells them whether to keep a group in or out of the data they're pulling from. And so it's not just this like San Francisco corporation saying this is what Beaverton thinks. Although it's a little bit that. But they're working in partnership with the city to make sure that the data they're pulling is reasonably representative and pulling from something that would be interesting to the city folks in learning about what people think. That said, it is still absolutely limited to people who participate on social media. And just by that very nature, you lose out on folks, which is why I like the idea of using it in the beginning to get a sense of maybe what some folks are thinking about, or using as a heat check throughout, but not necessarily incorporating it full on into all the other data we're collecting. But I'm open to all sorts of ideas.
The caution I was throwing out was our own languaging. If we start saying what's trending in the city is this, then we're falling into the gap of using that as what's trending in the city, and we could be missing things. And it's just a caution that I'm tossing out there.
It sounds like this is a good, like, broad data point that we can have. And if the city's already paid for it, then there's no drawback to us using it. And then we can look and see where it's incomplete and then go after specific populations for feedback. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And to Wade's point as well, oddly, because of COVID, I think that in-person outreach that you'll be able to do in the near future will predominantly be to underserved communities. And so you'll be able to supplement that with the online stuff from Zen City, just so that you kind of, get a sense of what people are talking about. But yeah, not to report it back out.
Yeah, I see this as something that supplements so I think this represents one segment or one type of community member who is represented on social media. And so I think we should use that as one of the components that we can draw information from, and then we do surveys and other means of communication, right? So we should use it as one of them and not the one.
And I'd like to know which different things they're pulling from when we get any information, because I just don't necessarily trust them to choose that on their own. So I really want to know like which ones.
You read my mind.
So what is the question before us in a committee? Is the question before us, do we use Zen City or not? Or is there some other, I mean, what are we talking about?
That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about is do we want this data? And then secondarily, is there an idea of what you want to use it for? And I think perhaps where we're at now is that, especially if they can pull it so quickly, if they can put together a portfolio of some information for us prior to the retreat, and that will give us an idea for something to look at, especially if they can get it to us like days in advance. And then that way we can email it out and have a chance for folks to digest it before we sit down together. And that may give us a better idea of how we want to use it. And if it's possible for them to include, because I know Jemai showed us the list at the meeting, but if they can include a list of the various sources they're gathering data from, is like 137 sources or something like that they're gathering data from.
Yeah, they have 163 data sources.
163.
And 11 local media interactions. I don't know what that means, but
me neither. But if they can give us a list of that along with a sample of the types of information they can provide, and then we can discuss that at the retreat, I think that's probably the best path forward from here today, unless folks have other ideas.
Doesn't it depend on what information we ask for? Because I assume they can pull all sorts of stuff. So don't we need to ask them a set of questions or something to get this data?
That's a great question. And I think they can give us sort of a trending line of the things that are being most talked about in Beaverton, pulling from these different outlets, and whether there are themes that way. And I would assume that if we have more targeted questions, then we could pull those too. And so if you all have a particular targeted question or two that you want, then we can raise that. I don't know that I have one yet because I haven't really seen what they can do. And so I'm not sure what to ask them. But if you have ideas, let's do it.
if you're interested, I could see whether or not I could have somebody pop into our retreat maybe, and then we can ask from Zen City, and then we can ask them questions too. And I could front load it and let them know what some of our interests are, like, well, tell us more about exactly what you can answer for us and that sort of thing.
I think that would actually be really helpful. So that way they can walk us through whatever that data is they provide us, because at least I know I won't be able to do that very well on my own. So, okay. All right. So I think that concludes the Zen City discussion, unless there's anything burning people want to get out there.
I just want to know if it's all social media sites or like if it's Facebook dominant, or because I think there's different segments of the population on different social media sites. So I wouldn't want it to be just Facebook. Like Instagram might be more useful.
It sounded like they were pulling from all the main socials, but they didn't get into a whole lot of detail about that at our conversation earlier this week. That's something we should definitely ask about.
Yeah, I do know they do Instagram, Facebook, Nextdoor.
We'll hear about all the package thieves now.
That stuff, yeah.
Okay. All right. So then moving forward, this is the big topic of the night, the retreat. Let's figure it out. So the most commonly available date was this coming Saturday, but in conversations with Shannon afterwards, that's sort of too short of a turnaround time, I guess, to get everything going. And so the next most common date was, I think, the 20th. So that's what we're shooting for. And I know there's for each of these dates, there were people who couldn't make it. And so it's really unfortunate that has to happen. But for those of you who said you couldn't make it, you know, if things change, come on board. We're also going to have it recorded. Also, if you can only show up for a little bit, there's no reason to miss the whole time if you can come for a little while. And I think we'll have to be taking minutes and doing things like that anyway. So we'll have some updates, and we'll dedicate some time at the beginning of our March meeting to make sure everyone's on a similar page. And if there were any topics that were particularly contested or where we weren't sure where we're going to land yet, we can rebroach those with the full board, or the full committee rather, in March. So do people have concerns about doing this on the 20th? Okay. So then my thought, and I want to get feedback from you on this, Zoom, for me, it's hard to be on Zoom for a long time. If we were having an in-person retreat, non-COVID, I'd like to have a day where we can sort of be casual and have brunch and stuff like that. But I don't think we want to do that over Zoom. My thought is to have two 2-hour sessions with a half-hour break in between them. I think that's manageable, but also gives us a lot of time to cover ground. And so we could start at 12:30 and then we'd be done, you know, by 4:30-ish, 5. Is that a doable time frame? Do people want to shift earlier or later? Does that pose big problems for anybody?
I'm better in the morning, but I can adjust.
I'm fine with moving it early if folks want it earlier. I don't sleep, so whenever you want to do it would work for me.
I would like to defer to the people who have families with kids in school and let them set the priority as to timing.
That's a good idea.
Brian, I was hoping you could drive and drop brunch to all our houses so that we could all eat the same thing at the same time, like open up package number 3 and then it's like a cookie.
You know, I would, but Google Maps only allows 8 locations in a row. And so there's just too many people, I can't do it. But I appreciate the thought. I'm right there with you.
In terms of time, if we can be done like by 5:30, like that would be great for me. I'm also open to going earlier in the day also.
Okay.
So yeah.
I think we definitely want to be done by 5:30 without a doubt. I think if we do 2 2-hour sessions with a half-hour break in between, we should be done by 5. Going into the evening after all afternoon, no one wants to do that.
11 or later is fine with me.
What's that?
11 or later is fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just skew towards earlier. Just
okay.
Mid-afternoon is like when I get a little sleepy.
Sure. So what we could do, if folks want to do earlier, we could do a 10 o'clock 2-hour session, take a half-hour or so break, or maybe even a full hour for lunch, and then 1 to 2.
I think Subba just said 11 was
11.
So we could do 11 to 1 and then 1:30 to 3:30.
I like that plan. Other people fine with that? Okay. I'll write that down. That's set. Okay, so the next big thing is, I think there are a lot of things that we want to talk about, but let's first figure out the things we have to get done. What do people think should be the priority topics for the meeting? All right, I'll start. I think that one thing that we didn't do too much of at the beginning of this is getting to know each other, and we're going to be working together a lot. And so I'd like to dedicate a not huge, but some significant amount of time to us sort of understanding each other, because normally on this committee, we start with like a bowling night or a dinner or something like that for everyone to get to know each other. And then the first meeting, we'll have more time doing that. But over Zoom, it can be kind of awkward and weird, especially when we're trying to do something in an hour and a half. And so I think spending the first, maybe say 20-ish minutes or so to give people a chance to say why they're interested in VAC and why this board appealed to them, and why, and some things they're hoping to accomplish over the course of this year with the outreach process. So that way we can all have an understanding of our background and what we want to do. I think that's important. Do people agree?
I think if we want to get to know each other, then we should talk about things that have nothing to do with VAC.
Or that.
You're also going to need more than 20 minutes, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about that. So maybe half an hour?
No, you need like the whole morning session if you really like.
Do you think we want to spend 2 hours on that of our 4 hours? If people do, then we could.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's ways to weave it in to other topics too.
Well, if you, with
That's
12
cool.
of us, if you're doing 6 minutes apiece, that's your full hour or whatever. I didn't calculate that really well, but 5 minutes apiece. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you're right. You're right. Math was never my strong suit. Okay, but I think that's something that sounds like, are we all in agreement? That's something we should talk about a little bit, at least at the beginning. Okay, good. I'm seeing head nod. So I'll write that down as one of the topics and we can see how many topics that we come up with.
So
But
along those lines, I think it's part of getting to know each other is just how we create a safe space to interact with each other, and just how we work together in general, whether it's these meetings, the retreats, or if we're out doing something, just some ground rules.
okay, I like that. And Councilor Fagin's joined us. Say welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I apologize I couldn't be here at the beginning, but I was telling Brian before before everybody got here, that one of my favorite things about being a council liaison is being able to come in early and meet everybody as they come in and then hang out afterwards and chat and get to know people. So unfortunately, we don't have that luxury in this time, but going forward, I anticipate that I will be here at the beginning and stay through most meetings, and I'm here mostly as a resource. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. I'm available during meetings or after meetings. Just feel free to reach out and ask any questions you have about the city or the committee itself.
Well, thank you very much. And just to give you an update as to where we're at, we just started talking about the retreat, and we decided when and the time frames, and now we're going over the topics that we know we need to cover and need to discuss during the retreat, and then also going to things we'd like to discuss if we have enough time to do so. So that's where we're at, and we talked about setting some ground rules so we can all have productive and safe conversations, and then getting to know each other. So what else do we need to discuss during the retreat? What do people think?
Can I just ask a question about in the past, what has been the goal of the retreats for the back? Because I've been on the Arts Commission, and the goal at our retreat is maybe different than what the goal of this kind of a retreat is. What do we want to walk away with?
That's a great question. And we haven't had a retreat in the last few years when I've been here. So there isn't really a set expectation. From our last meeting, I think where we landed roughly was that we wanted this to be a time for us to really dive in on how we're going to proceed for the rest of the year. And so, for instance, I think one of the things we need to talk about is time frame, and this is something Councilor Fagin and I talked about before this too, about setting guideposts as to how long we want to be spending in the various phases of this process. And I think it's going to be an important time for us to be able to cover things that take more discussion, because in our monthly meetings, we'll have, on the agenda, we've got today 8 items or so. And at most we have half an hour allocated for any individual item. And within that, there are all these sub things we want to talk about. And so conversations that we need to have and want to have that require more conversation, I think, are important to put into the retreat.
So will we be diving deep into the conversation of how we're going to gather feedback and what kind of feedback we're looking towards this year? It doesn't sound like we have a lot of opportunities to have 2 dedicated hours for one agenda item.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that's definitely something that we should talk about is what do we want to learn and how are we going to get that information?
I think as part of that, like going through the outline that was attached for this meeting, the one that goes through, I think, the prior plan would be really helpful. And just kind of, this is a good opportunity to walk through it, see what people think, if there's anything that we think should definitely stay, or maybe we want to edit out or add to. I think that would be a really great time to really dive into that.
And what's been done for the plan?
I'm sorry, Subba, I missed that again. I think my speaker is always the best.
And what had been done with the previous plan?
Yeah, spending some time talking about the history and where it started and how it's evolved. I think that's a good idea.
If we can maybe have some of those things prior to the retreat, I think it would be helpful. I remember last meeting we talked about it might be good to know how effective certain outreach techniques were. I think that was one of the things that people were curious about. So any kind of thing, any kind of resources that we could be front loaded with so that we can be a little bit more prepared rather than seeing it for the first time at the retreat.
I think that's really important.
And along the same lines too, like what tool, I'm still trying to wrap my head around and my arms around what tools we have at our disposal. And so it's Zen City, but also surveys, like what's been used in the past, what's on the horizon, what do we have access to?
And I think at the last meeting, we also talked about what demographics were, what demographics gave feedback and what demographics did not give feedback. So we can start planning of how to do outreach.
Brian or Shannon, can you remind me, do we have a few like set dates that we need to hit? Like, are we scheduled for like a council roundtable that we need to have information by, or do we need to have choose a consultant by a certain time? Like, has any of that been set, or is that what you're talking about, timeline, Brian, that we need to be thinking about?
I think largely that's what we're talking about, but then Shannon just today, I think, set when our first presentation to the city council is going to be, and was it March 30th?
Yes.
Okay, and so I anticipate that at that date, after having had the retreat and then our March meeting, we'll be able to give a presentation that says roughly, here's what we would like to do as a broad plan, and then allow them that time to digest that and then give us feedback either then or more likely later as to whether they like that idea, they want tweaks to that idea, or if there are other issues. And then Shannon, do we need to have an idea of budget by that time? I think that's one of the more technical pieces that's going to be difficult for us to figure out on our own.
So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor, but is the supplemental budget happens in May, and there was nothing budgeted for a consultant in the past fiscal year. And so if we wanted something really soon, we would have to try and get that approved during the supplemental budget things that happen in May. Otherwise, I believe we would have to wait until June to try and get it into the next fiscal year's budget. Is that correct?
It's one of those tricky budget things. So the budget committee or the budget for 2021-2022, which is the fiscal year for the city, which starts July 1st. Those budget committee meetings are in May, but during those budget committee meetings, we do a supplemental budget for 2020-2021, so the year ending. So if you need the money for the consultant before June 30th, you would want to put it in supplemental. If you need the money for the consultants July 1st or later, you'd put it in the regular budget. So my guess is, because this is going to be a longer term project, a 18-month or longer project, you're going to want to be in both, right? You're probably going to want some money to be able to bring on a consultant early. So you'll want something in supplemental, and then you'll want some in the next budget, which would be the regular budget. So I think you're going to want to figure out with finance how that's going to work and the best way to split it up. But that, from previous board experiences, that's more staff job than the committee's job to figure out how to get the funding and exactly how much will be needed. And a lot of that's going to depend on the type of support that you want from a consultant. In envisioning, we've done it a number of different ways. So I think, Shannon, that unfortunately falls on you a lot, but I think when you start getting ideas of the services that can be provided, that's what you can bring back to the committee, and everyone here that's on the committee can talk about what they want out of a consultant.
Thank you, that's really helpful. So Brian, I think one of the main goals of the retreat would be great to say, you know, what you just said of what does this look like and what are we bringing forward to council for their input on?
Absolutely. Okay. And I'm just looking over my notes now, trying to synthesize, but if you all have other ideas, let's get them all out now. I can put them all on paper, then mesh into big topics. All right. I feel like then we've covered a good chunk of it. I'll send out, let's see, how do we want to do this? So logistically, Shannon, going forward, if we're going to do this on the 20th, then we'll want to make sure that we get information out to everybody pretty soon. And so obviously the Zoom links and things like that, but then additionally, it sounds like folks would like, and I agree with this, if we can have in that email the past community visions, and I think we sent out the most recent one before our previous meeting, but if there can be the past ones, and if there's any, I don't know if these exist, but if there are, for instance, notes from previous staff liaisons, or if there are minutes from meetings where they talked about the effectiveness of different tools, like thinking about to Christina's comment, I'm trying to think of how we can gauge the effectiveness of different, if there are any documents that gauge the effectiveness of different techniques, or if there are things that show what people learn from, then we can learn from and not repeat those mistakes or perhaps compound on their successes. I don't know what exists in that regard, but if it exists, those sorts of things I think would be very helpful.
I can look into that. Considering that we're going to be challenged by COVID, I actually think we may be benefited by talking to Councilor Hassan about what worked for them with the THPRD vision and their outreach process for that, because they did that during COVID. So that might be even more useful to us than finding out how things went in the past. Plus, technology has changed so much since the 2010 vision that outreach and stuff is different too. So there was 2010, 2016 were the two times I believe that outreach actually happened. So, you know, we've come a long way even since then. So I'll see what I can find. But
and then
yeah,
over this weekend, what I will do is I'll synthesize these notes I just took and send them to you for like a mock-up of an agenda. And then that way we can get agenda materials out to people fairly soon, so folks have a time to digest them. And then also, if you see that I missed something or there's something that came to mind that we need to include, you can shoot an email back. And you all know the way I do is I email Shannon and BCC the rest of you, so I won't run into those public meetings issues. So as long as you just reply to me and Shannon, we can just pop that on in there. All right, so with that, before we move forward, any questions about the retreat, any other ideas that people had while we were talking and putting all this together before we move on to the next thing?
Brian, I don't remember who suggested, but someone suggested having some demographic information so that we have an idea of who may not have been as included in the visioning process because we haven't been able to reach that community, so that maybe we can use that time to brainstorm. Making sure that they're included more this time around might be helpful.
Definitely. Okay, I think that was a really good, productive discussion. So now, since we have Councilor Fagin here for a little bit, if you could provide us with a council update, that'd be great.
Yeah, I didn't want to hijack the middle of your agenda, but typically what I'll do is I'll bring like one or two things that I think are interesting to the committee and bring forward about something that's going on at Councilor in the city. And as I get to know the group more, which is hard in COVID times, but I'll be able to bring things that you have asked questions about or that I think would be interesting to the committee specifically. First, so I have two things for tonight. One of them is last night in the council meeting, we approved a additional it's roughly $675,000 in community development block grant money, which is money that comes from the federal government. In this case, it was part of the CARES Act. And of that, we're going to be able to put forward $526,000 towards rental assistance program. So we have a rental assistance program that we run every year. Obviously, this year, there's been way more need than we could fund. So we are able to fund more than $500,000 of additional rental assistance. The other $100,000 we're putting forward for hotel vouchers to help out the homeless community. And it's been working fairly well where when people are looking for housing, that we're able to get them into a hotel and then line them or connect them with the network of services that are available in our community. So it's great to be able to add to that because there's a real need. There's an additional, it's $10,000 that goes into covering all of the administrative costs for being able to run the two programs. But so we approved that last night. It's one of those weird things that goes through on consent agenda. So it's not even a discussion. If you could watch the meeting and you'd hear the subject of the bill, but without digging into it, you wouldn't know the details of it. So that was one that is important for the community. The other is just to talk about the meeting that's going on in the background here. I also serve on the Regional Water Providers Consortium, which is a mouthful, but it's to me it's an interesting board because all of the region up here, so basically from Gresham to Forest Grove, all of the water districts work together. And one of what this board works on is we focus on conservation, emergency preparedness and resiliency, and then regional coordination. And it allows us to, as a community, have TV commercials about conserving water, to have a plan in place that if one of the region's water supplies has an issue, we're there to help support the other communities. For example, when Salem had a problem with blue-green algae a couple of years ago, Beaverton, the Tualatin Valley Water District, and the Regional Water Providers Consortium all sent trailers down to Salem to provide drinking water for the community there. Even though they're not part of the consortium, we worked together to make sure we could support our fellow Oregonians. And I enjoyed that board. It's an interesting one. I've been the chair for the past 2 years, so I'm ending my term at the next meeting. So the next meeting I'll be there and hopefully be able to hand the gavel off like at the very beginning. So that's kind of the other thing that's going on, and that one's funny because it's happening right now. Yeah, other than that, the other purpose that I'm here for is to just answer any questions you have about anything going on in the city. I'll do the best that I can to answer, and if I can't, I will get an answer and get back to you.
I have a question about the rental assistance and hotel vouchers.
Yeah.
I don't have an understanding of whether $500,000 is a lot or just a drop in the bucket compared to the need.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because we don't, so it's run through Community Action, which is an organization that's countywide, but they can focus the money from Beaverton on Beaverton. And we don't have a good understanding of what the full need is, but it's for me, it's just good there's more. And that we're utilizing federal money to come back into the community and help people that need it.
How can we measure what the need is? I mean, I just don't have an understanding of those kind of numbers.
Yeah, I can see what we have as far as data on, you know, for me, it would go to number of requests for assistance. And I can see what we can find out and get back to you on it. Anything else?
Councilor Fagin, do you want to tell them a little bit about the CRM software that hopefully we'll be getting in the future so that we'll be able to answer those questions in great depth? I was excited when I heard this in your retreat.
Well, except that this one is kind of outside that bucket because this one goes into a different organization, right? We go to the community action who's running the rental assistance program. And my personal connection to this program was that back when I used to have a home phone, our phone number was 1 digit off from the rental assistance program. So at the first of the month, we'd get phone calls, and sometimes it was from like kids that could speak English trying to get money for their parents. And it took a few times for me to figure out that, okay, there's got to be a connection, right? I didn't know what the number was, but I'm like, there's got to be a connection here. So I started doing some research, and it was before I was on council, but found out what the rental assistance program was, found the right phone number, and then what we would do is we would call back everybody that left a message and get them the right number, because you would just leave a message and people wouldn't know that they were leaving the message in the wrong place. But yeah, so we'd need to work with them to find out what the actual data is, and wouldn't be able to do it with a city program.
So Wade, I looked at the community action website and it said that $40 keeps a family in their home for one more day. So if you divide 500,000 by 40, that's 12,500 days. If that helps you feel impact.
But that's good. And I'll dig a little bit deeper and find out what the number of requests were if that's of interest. Okay, well, I appreciate being here, and I'm really excited to see your work and how it comes together. And I told Brian and Shannon, my role here is to help, not to direct. So, as you go, if you have questions about the work that you guys are undertaking, just let me know. And I'm always willing to offer opinion, but I don't want to get in your way. This is about the work that you all want to do, and it's vitally important to the city. I think talking to the community and getting their input and bringing it back to the city is one of the most important assets that we have. And when I did this work in 2010, I realized partway through that there had never before been a way for the community to tell the city council what they wanted and what was important. And this piece of work that you guys are starting out on is really important to the city. It's important to the council, it's important to the staff, but it's important to our whole community. And we intentionally in 2010 called it the community vision because it wasn't the Beaverton city vision. This was a vision of the community. And this is one of those times where we're not worried about where people live, whether they're in the city or just next to the city, or they just come here for work. This is about anyone that interacts in our community. We want to understand what the needs are so that we can address them. And it's done a lot of good for our community over the last 10 years. And I think it will for the next 10 with the work that you guys are going to all put in. So thank you now for the hard work you're going to be doing, because it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. So thanks so much.
And thank you for joining us. We appreciate it and look forward a lot to working with you on this project. So let's see. We have actionable items and dates to remember, and then our roundtable, and that's it. So as far as the actionable items go, and I think Shannon, your plate is probably the fullest at this point, with getting out that survey to the Baptist church, and then also working on gathering those materials and things for the retreat. Do you need any more information from us about any of those things?
Not at this time. I'll let you know if I do.
Okay, perfect. So then we'll just conclude with the roundtable, and the only thing I'll say here is that with this retreat coming up, I like facilitating meetings, but I'm not always good at doing the let's get to know each other stuff. I'm really bad at that kind of thing. And so if you're someone who's good at it and you've had good icebreakers and have good ideas of how to integrate that into the meeting, please shoot me an email or send me a text, give me a call, because it'll help all of us have a better time than if I just figure it out on my own. So that's what I have to share. But then anyone else have things they want to talk about or things from their groups they're involved with they want to make sure we hear about?
Yeah, could I make a plug for the Beaverton School District Community Conversations that's coming up March 10th? I co-hosted a panel last year. The idea is it's community conversations with a focus on social justice / diversity, equity, and inclusion. And last year I was a panelist representing a different board, but I don't think it matters what board. I think it matters that we get our youth to think about getting involved at the city level, in the city that they live in. So if there's like 1 or 2 people who wanna sit on a board or sit on a panel with me for 30 minutes, it's March 10th, I believe, and it'll be on Zoom. And yeah, just trying to connect our teenagers with what they can do in the city to further community connections.
What time on March 10th?
That's a tough question.
Okay.
I have it somewhere.
Do you just talk or is it Q&A too?
It's probably Q&A. Like there's not a presentation that's necessary. It's just, hey, my name is blah, blah, this is what I do. And here's an opportunity. Did you know? And every time I've talked to people, it's been like, oh, I didn't, what's a board and commission? Like I've never heard of that. It's March 10th and it's in the late afternoon. It's 4 to 6 p.m. And it doesn't have to be 4 to 6 p.m. It can be, like just one of the 2 sessions, 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 or something.
Anyone else have things they want to share from the various groups they're involved with? Okay. So with that, thank you all very much. This was another, oh, Sarah.
Sorry, you go too fast.
I'm sorry, another problem of mine.
I was just going to say, just at the zoo, we are finishing up our polar bear habitat. So if you want, and we're giving the public an opportunity, if you're going to the zoo next weekend, so the long weekend that's over President's Day, you can actually walk inside the habitat that Nora will be in. So that's just a cool opportunity if you get to. But sorry, kids have to be over 12 because there's a big giant pool in there and we don't want anyone falling in.
Can I just take a minute? Does anybody have any updates to their roster information who has not yet confirmed for me that their roster information is correct?
I have a question about the roster. What's the purpose of it? Are you posting it online or something?
No.
Like just for us, or like what's the purpose? Thanks.
It's so the city can reach out to you and get in touch with you and you can get in touch with each other, but no, we will not post that online. Anybody changes?
No.
Okay, I'm just gonna say you're all good then. Yay.
I was just going to share that if you're in Central Beaverton, the Central Beaverton Neighborhood Association Committee is kicking off 3 new subcommittees to get involved with like events for the neighborhood, arts, or sustainability. So it's a way to participate with the NAC, but not necessarily have to also go to just the NAC meetings to hear about land use, if y'all are interested.
Okay, well, unless there's anything else, and I'll take a pause here just to make sure. Then I think that's it for this month, or rather for this meeting. and I'll see you all on the 20th for our retreat, or at least hopefully most of you will be able to make it. I think, or most will, hopefully all. So thank you very much. Another productive meeting. Looking forward to the 20th. All right. See you all later.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Thanks, Brian.